Now that you're comfortable with various techniques for selecting objects on your page, it's time to start manipulating them. So in this lesson, we're going to start with moving and resizing objects. There's a few different ways to do it, depending on how precise you need to be. We're going to explore those using the same file we were working with in the previous lesson, our Green Onion file. If you've skipped to this lesson and you want to get caught up, you can go to the Lesson 4 folder of your exercise files if you've got them, and open up Green Onion File 2. It's a CorelDRAW file. We're on our first page here, our window sign, and we're going to focus in on this image down in the bottom left-hand corner, the peas in a pod. So let's zoom into that area using our zoom tool, the fourth button down in the toolbox, and we'll just click and drag over that area to zoom in to our image. Now we know that when we use our pick tool, so we'll click on the pick tool and click on an image, it becomes selected. Now there's a number of things we can do to this, such as move it and resize it. So let's start with moving this object. If I want to move it over to the right and up, I can simply click and drag. So you can see clicking and drag, I've got the 4-pointed arrow. I can just move it into a location where I want by clicking and dragging. If I want it maybe right at the very bottom left-hand corner of the page, well, I can try and get it there, but notice that I'm allowed to overlap the edges. So a good way to make sure that you're right in the right spot is to use guidelines. We talked about those in a previous lesson. We'll move over to the ruler on the left, click and drag over, and kind of snaps to the edge of the page there. It also says edge on my mouse pointer. And I'm going to drag one down as well, right into that spot right there. Make sure from my view menu that Snap to Guidelines is selected, and it is. It's checked off right there. So I can go back to my image, click on it, and now when I move it into the bottom left corner of the page, see how it snaps into position like a little magnet, just pulling it into that spot. And when I release, I know it's in the exact location where I want it. Now that's one way to move an object. Let's click on our guidelines. I'm going to go click here, hit your delete key, click on the other guideline, turns red, hit your delete key to remove those. Another option is to choose a precise coordinate for this actual image. If you look up the property bar, for example, when the image is selected, so we'll click on it, you're going to see the exact X and Y coordinates according to the ruler and the center of this object. The center, it appears, is at about 2.161 inches. And the y-axis, you can see up about 3.317 inches. And sure enough, if I look at the ruler, it's over 3 inches here, the center, and it's past the 2-inch mark up here on my horizontal ruler. So if I wanted the center point to be exactly, let's say, 2.5 inches in, I can just highlight everything after the 2 point and type in a 5. And maybe down below, I want to bump this up to 3.8. I'll change that 3.317 to an 8 and hit enter. And it's locked into position right where I want the center point to be. So very precise. So that's another way to move an object into a precise location. There's yet one other way to move an object. I'm going to move my pointer out here so it's out of the way. And we're going to move our object with the keyboard using the actual keys on the keyboard. So if I hit the right arrow, you can see how my image is moving ever so slightly to the right. If I hit the up arrow, you can see it's slightly moving up. Now it's not moving very far. Where's this coming from? Well, I'm going to click out here off the page, and from my property bar, over here you'll see our little symbol for movement is set to 0.01 inches as our nudge offset. That's exactly what we're doing. We're nudging the object, and with each tap of the cursor key, it's moving 0.01 inches on a very large page. So we can change that if we want. I'm going to change that from 0.01 to 0.1 by taking out the 0. I'll hit enter to lock that in. And now when I click on my object and start moving it with my up arrow, you can see it's really moving much faster and much farther. Now there are some other options for moving that if you need to be even more precise. There's super nudging and micro nudging as well. The easiest way to see those settings is just to double click here on our ruler. I'm going to go to the top ruler, double click. This is going to open up our options under rulers. We can access that too from the menus, but you can see the nudge is now set to 0.1. That's my new setting. Super nudge is 10 times that. So that means holding down my Shift key while I hit the cursor keys on my keyboard, I'm going to move it 10 times 0.1 inch or a full inch. Micro nudging is divided by 10. So let's try those out. And of course, we can change those values if we wanted to. I'm going to bump that down to 5, and I'm going to bump this one down to 5 as well. There we go. And when I click OK, I've changed those settings. So if I hit my down arrow, I know it's going to move 0.1 inches. If I hold down Shift and the down arrow, it's going to move a full inch. There we go. Now if I hold down Control, you can see each tap of the up arrow, it's not moving very far. So you've got all those options for being very precise, and of course you also have the ability to just click and drag, another easy way to move to a specific location. So I'm going to overlap both of those borders ever so slightly and just leave it right there. All right, now it's time to talk about resizing your object. Got a couple of options there as well. The current size of my selected object does appear up here on the property bar. And you can see it's set to 4.563 inches wide by 6.868 inches tall. That represents about 68.7% of the actual size. Now this little lock here is very important. If I deselect the lock, and that might be your default, if you look closely at it, it toggles on and off. If the lock appears to be open, that means I can change the proportions of my object. But if I want to keep the proportions and just make it a little bit smaller or a little bit larger, this needs to be locked. So I'm going to click on it. It appears locked. The button appears to be pressed in. And now I can choose a percentage or an actual figure here. Maybe it has to be exactly 4.8 inches wide. Well, I'm going to take out everything after the 4 point and put in an 8. And when I hit Enter, look what happens to the size. It's automatically adjusted to 7.225, so it keeps its proportions. Now if I turn this lock off and I change this back to 4.5, hit Enter, notice that the height did not change, and now I've got a taller, skinnier graphic. So I'm going to undo that because right now you can see the percentage width-wise is smaller than the percentage height-wise. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to lock my proportions. And now I'm going to change this back to 4.5. I'm going to take out the 8, put in the 5, hit Enter, and everything's perfect. So that's one way to size. Obviously, we can use the handles as well. The sizing handles, they're really called selection handles. I call them sizing handles. It's easier to remember because we can go to these handles, and when we see the double arrow appear, we can click and drag to change the height. And that's squishing it down. We can change the widths by going to either side. I'm going to go to the right side and squish it in and pull it back out. We can go to the corners and click and drag, and that's going to maintain proportion. So whatever the proportion was when I started to click and drag, it's going to maintain those proportions. Unless I hold down my Alt key, then I can override that and change both the width and the height simultaneously. So let's go back here, change this to 67%. Tab down, change that to 67% and hit Enter. You can see what happens. It's already changed my height to keep the proportion. So I need to unlock to change this back to 67. When I hit Enter, that's the size I want, and now I'll lock it so I never lose those proportions. I'm also going to move it up slightly so that it's closer to my beige rectangle, and that's the spot I want it right there. I deselect by clicking off of the object. So there's a couple of different methods of moving and resizing an object. I'm going to hold down Shift and press F4 to zoom back out and try once more now, but with multiple objects. In this case, I want to move all of these items under daily specials with their dollar amounts. I want to move it down a little bit. So I'm going to use my marquee select that we learned in the previous lesson to highlight just those items. There, they're all selected, 8 objects in all. It says so down here on my property bar. And I'm just going to use my nudge key, so the down arrow on my keyboard allows me to move it down. There we go, 0.1 inch with each tap. And when I get to the spot where I want to be, I stop. I deselect by clicking out here on the page, and there's my end result. Perfect. So all of those techniques for moving and resizing apply to a single object as well as many objects. It just depends on what you've selected. So that's just a couple of things we can do with selected objects. In the next lesson, we're going to move on to rotating and skewing those objects.